Hello, radiant souls. Let me ask you this: have you ever felt as though the ground beneath you gave way, leaving you in a hollow space where nothing makes sense anymore? Perhaps you've reached that point on your twin flame journey where silence grows heavy, your nervous system feels shattered, and your heart whispers that everything is lost. This stage is often mistaken as failure or weakness, but what if I told you that this very collapse, this dark and trembling void, is not the end, but the sacred threshold to something infinitely greater? Many of you are standing right there now, asking why it hurts so deeply, why the feminine must break, and whether the masculine even sees or feels your pain. In today's teaching, we are going to walk hand in hand through this mysterious terrain. I will show you why collapse happens, what it does to your inner world, and how it shakes the divine masculine to his very core. Together, we will decode the signals hidden in silence, unravel the nervous system's cries, and see how the so-called breaking is really the nervous system rewiring itself for union. You will also learn how the divine masculine responds in this stage, not with indifference, as it may appear, but with a hidden reverence that begins to stir beneath his confusion and fear. This video is your map through the storm, offering clarity where before there was only chaos. By staying with me until the end of this message, you will not only understand collapse, you will be transformed by it. You will see that your breakdown is not punishment but initiation. You will learn to embrace the void, not as abandonment, but as sacred space where the new you is born. And as you reclaim your power in this silence, you will also see how your divine masculine mirrors that rebirth, slowly shedding the karmic mask to reveal the soul you have always known. The spiritual universe does not simply give you knowledge, it changes your frequency, it awakens your vision, and it calls forth your highest self. So I invite you, challenge you, to walk this journey with me all the way through. Watch until the end, because the doorway you have been searching for may open in the very next breath. Number 1. What collapse really? Island. Collapse is not weakness, and it is certainly not failure. To call it either of those things would be to misinterpret the most sacred moment of the twin flame journey. Collapse is the dissolving of every false scaffolding the divine feminine has built in order to survive structures made of coping strategies, illusions about love, and deeply ingrained survival patterns like chasing, fixing, and pleasing. For so long, many feminines believe that holding the connection together is their responsibility, that if they give a little more, try a little harder, or sacrifice a little deeper, then love will finally balance. But when the divine masculine withdraws or fails to meet the feminine in the way her soul longs for, something inside her system can no longer sustain that illusion. Her nervous system goes into shock, and she realizes, often with devastating clarity, that she cannot carry both sides of the connection anymore. This moment feels like breaking, but in reality, it is wholly dismantling. The collapse is not the end of her story. It is the sacred intervention that strips away everything that was never meant to hold. All the roles she played to feel worthy, all the masks she wore to keep the peace, all the patterns of bending, stretching, and sacrificing beyond her limits, they dissolve like sandcastles meeting the tide. And though it feels terrifying to the human self, this collapse is orchestrated by the soul. It is not punishment. It is not abandonment. It is the divine saying, "You no longer have to carry what was never yours to hold." Collapse reveals a deeper truth about union itself. True reunion between twin flames can only occur when both poles of the connection carry their own energy. One cannot endlessly overgive while the other avoids responsibility. One cannot chase while the other runs forever. When the feminine collapses, she is brought face to face with the futility of trying to play both roles at once. This collapse forces a sacred recalibration. It is as if the soul whispers, "Lay it down, beloved. Stop carrying his half of the journey. Let the divine masculine find his own footing. Only then will he be able to truly meet you." The beauty of collapse lies in what it initiates. It marks the beginning of rebirth, not only for the feminine who finally steps out of the exhausting cycle of proving her worth, but also for the masculine who is now confronted with the weight of what he has avoided. The union itself begins to shift as the feminine's energy returns to her own body, no longer leaking outward in desperation or unbalanced giving. In this sacred reset, both counterparts are invited to rebuild on new ground. So collapse, though painful, is actually an invitation to life. It is the feminine's resurrection disguised as loss, the masculine's awakening disguised as silence, and the union's rebirth disguised as separation. It is the gateway through which illusion falls away and truth finally begins to breathe. Before we move forward into the next stage of this journey, I want to pause here with you. Collapse may sound frightening, but when you truly understand it, you see that it is the seedbed of rebirth. If this message has touched you, I encourage you to take a moment and reflect on what collapse has meant in your own journey. Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story may be the very thing that gives another soul the courage to keep going. And if you'd like to affirm this shift in your own life, simply type, "Collapse is my doorway to rebirth," in the comments as a declaration of faith. Don't forget to like this video if it resonates with you, because it helps this message reach more of our soul family. Number 2. The experience of collapse. For many divine feminines walking the twin flame journey, the experience of collapse is one of the most misunderstood yet profoundly transformative stages. It does not arrive lightly, nor does it announce itself with clarity. Instead, it creeps in after long months, sometimes even years of carrying the weight of the connection alone. The feminine, often the one holding space, nurturing hope, and keeping the energetic thread alive, eventually reaches a breaking point. What once felt like boundless love and resilience begins to feel like fatigue, burnout, and an overwhelming emotional exhaustion that cannot be ignored. She may notice herself running out of strength to send love, to pray for change, or to believe in reunion. This exhaustion is not weakness. It is the sign that her soul is demanding a new way of being. During collapse, she may experience a deep sense of hopelessness, as though the very vision she built her heart upon is slipping away. Sacred rage surfaces anger not at the divine masculine himself, but at the unfairness of carrying both sides of the connection for so long. Tears flow, sometimes uncontrollably, as grief and longing pour through her system. Isolation often follows, because she cannot find words to describe this mysterious ache to those who have never walked such a path. In the stillness of this loneliness, she begins questioning everything: her beliefs, her intuition, her love, even her very purpose. It feels as though the ground beneath her is disintegrating. Psychologically, this mirrors what many spiritual teachers describe as ego death. The old identity, the version of her that coped through over-giving, pleasing, or endlessly waiting, can no longer survive. Spiritually, collapse resonates with the archetype of the dark night of the soul. In this stage, the divine feminine feels stripped of light, clarity, and direction. Both psychological and spiritual perspectives point toward the same truth. Something old must die so that something new can be born. This death is not physical but energetic. It is the death of illusions, of survival patterns, of attachments that block true union. And yet, collapse is not passive. It is not a void where nothing happens. It is alchemical, sacred, and purposeful. Within collapse, the nervous system begins to shift from hypervigilance, constantly watching, worrying, and trying to control, into surrender. This surrender is not resignation but a reset. It is the rewiring of the body and soul to release the constant survival mode that has been running for years. In this reset, karmic programming dissolves piece by piece. The old voices of fear, scarcity, and unworthiness lose their power. Soul fragments, parts of the feminine that were once scattered, hidden, or abandoned, slowly return to her. She begins to remember herself as whole without needing to force union or chase love. What makes collapse so difficult is that it feels destructive. It feels like everything is falling apart, like the feminine has lost her strength, her hope, and even her connection. But beneath this destruction, something far greater is being built. Collapse is the universe rewiring her for coherence. It is the stripping away of false scaffolding so that she can finally sit in the void without rushing to fix it. It is the training of her spirit to find peace even in emptiness, to stand rooted even in silence. And though the experience is painful, it is this very pain that becomes the womb of transformation. In truth, collapse is a sacred threshold. It is the point where the old feminine, the one who carried both sides, the one who believed she had to do it all, finally dissolves. From this dissolving emerges a feminine who is free, whole, and magnetic. Collapse is not the end of the story. It is the necessary initiation that prepares both her, the masculine, and the union itself for rebirth. Number 3. The rebuilding phase. After the experience of collapse, many divine feminines are surprised to find that what comes next is not a return to what was, but the birth of something entirely new. This rebuilding phase is not about patching up old wounds or slipping back into the familiar patterns of overgiving, chasing, or holding the connection together single-handedly. Instead, it is a sacred reconstruction of self from a foundation of sovereignty, peace, and truth. Where once love was entangled with effort, with bargaining, or with the silent hope that devotion would be enough, now love arises from wholeness. Silence no longer threatens her essence, and separation no longer robs her of her worth. The feminine no longer collapses for the masculine, nor carries his half of the field. This shift is palpable, and the divine masculine feels it deeply. He senses, even in the unseen, that she is no longer defined by waiting for him, but anchored in her own power. The rebuilding begins not in the mind, but in the body. The first steps are often simple, almost ordinary: choosing rest, honoring sleep, feeding the body with nourishment rather than neglect, and grounding into the earth instead of floating in anxious anticipation. This physical reset signals to the nervous system that survival mode is no longer the only option. From there, the rebuilding ripples outward. Emotional release follows. Grief is honored rather than suppressed. Anger is allowed to move through rather than locked away, and longing is expressed rather than denied. These emotions, once feared, become guides. They clear out old energy and create space for something truer to emerge. As the feminine continues this journey, she begins to craft a life that does not hinge on the masculine's choices or attention. Boundaries are drawn not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Affirmations replace the inner critic, speaking life and strength where once there was self-doubt. Daily routines become acts of devotion to herself: morning rituals, creative practices, walks in nature, moments of stillness that stabilize her energy without relying on his presence. In this way, she stops outsourcing her wholeness and begins to embody it. This rebuilding is quiet yet powerful. It does not demand recognition, nor does it seek validation. Instead, it anchors a new frequency in the field of union, a frequency rooted not in control, but in trust. The feminine learns that true power does not come from forcing outcomes or holding the connection together at all costs. True power comes from coherence, from standing in her truth regardless of external circumstances. As she embodies sovereignty, she naturally influences the energetic field she shares with her divine masculine. Without words, without effort, she models a new way of being that calls him toward his own awakening. Thus, rebuilding is not just recovery from collapse, it is transformation. It is the conscious choice to live as whole, free, and radiant, whether or not reunion has manifested in the physical. It is the preparation for divine union by becoming union within herself. And it is through this sovereignty that the feminine finally embodies the essence of divine love, anchored, steady, unshakable. Imagine a divine feminine who once spent every night checking her phone, hoping for a message from her masculine, only to collapse into tears when the screen remained dark. After her collapse, she chooses a different path. Instead of waiting in that silence, she begins creating a nightly ritual. She makes herself a warm cup of tea, writes down her emotions in a journal, and ends with affirmations like, "I am whole, I am loved, I am sovereign." At first it feels small, even fragile, but over time, this ritual becomes her anchor. Where once her nights were filled with anxiety, now they are filled with presence and peace. Her masculine feels the shift not because of anything she says or does to him directly, but because the energetic field between them no longer carries desperation. She is no longer holding his half of the connection. Instead, she radiates stability and wholeness, embodying the very essence of divine union without needing to force it. Number 4. The divine masculine's response. When the divine feminine collapses, the divine masculine feels it immediately, even if he cannot fully explain why. Up until that moment, She has been carrying more than her fair share of the energetic bond, over-functioning, over-giving, and often unconsciously holding not only her energy but his as well. She has been the stabilizer, the one who carries the flame when he drifts, the anchor that ensures the connection does not fall apart. But when she withdraws, whether through conscious surrender, exhaustion, or soul-level collapse, he experiences the absence like a thunderclap. It is as though the invisible thread that has quietly held him up suddenly snaps, and the silence that follows rattles his very core. For some divine masculines, this absence is interpreted as abandonment. They believe she has given up, turned her back, or chosen another path. For others, the experience is far deeper. It is their first raw encounter with their own void. What she has been shielding them from is suddenly exposed, and without her constant balancing presence, they are forced to meet the hollowness they have long avoided. This confrontation is not comfortable. It is destabilizing, disorienting, and in many ways terrifying. Yet, it is precisely this discomfort that often becomes the trigger for his awakening. In the beginning, the ego fights hard. He leans into old excuses, rehearses familiar justifications, or clings to karmic distractions, trying to convince himself that he can live without her resonance. But over time, those excuses begin to lose their power. The patterns that once gave him a false sense of stability collapse under their own weight. Nights become restless, days feel incomplete, and the places he once sought comfort begin to feel hollow. He cannot explain why ordinary life no longer satisfies him, but at the soul level, he knows that something essential is missing. It is in this raw emptiness that recognition dawns. He begins to see that her withdrawal was never rejection. In truth, her collapse was an invitation for him to rise into his own power, to claim responsibility for his energy, and to meet her not as a dependent child leaning on her strength, but as a counterpart who carries his own. Slowly, he realizes that she has not turned away from him. Rather, she has stepped back so that he can finally step forward. This shift is not only emotional but also energetic. Many masculines at this stage begin to feel powerful heart activations, sudden surges of warmth in the chest, moments of unexplainable tenderness, or even physical sensations that seem to come from nowhere. Dreams intensify, filled with visions of her face or scenarios where they reunite. Synchronicities start to appear, her name on billboards, her favorite song on the radio, repeating numbers, or chance encounters that mirror their journey. These are not coincidences, but soul-level nudges, reminders that truth is calling him back. The undeniable pull toward resonance grows stronger. No matter how much he tries to escape it, he feels magnetized toward her energy field. He begins to sense that the connection is not a chain holding him back, but a compass pointing him forward. What once felt like pressure now feels like truth, and though he may resist, his resistance grows weaker with every sign, every dream, every heart opening that whispers, "You cannot run from what you are." The masculine's response to the feminine's collapse, therefore, is not simple rejection or easy awakening. It is a complex process of unraveling. It is the dismantling of excuses, the burning away of illusions, and the stripping down of ego until only essence remains. In the silence of her absence, he finally hears his soul, and in that hearing, the awakening begins. If you've made it this far, beloved soul, it means you are deeply resonating with this journey, and perhaps even recognizing parts of your own story in the masculine's response. I invite you to take a moment to reflect. Have you felt these shifts in your connection? The silence that seemed unbearable, or the synchronicities that refused to let you forget? Share your experience in the comments below, because your story may be the very medicine another soul needs to hear. And if you simply want to anchor this truth into your field, type, "I trust the process of awakening," as your affirmation. This way, you not only declare your faith to yourself, but you also join a collective vibration of souls walking this path together. Number 5. The void and sovereignty. Between collapse and rebuilding lies one of the most mysterious, sacred, and misunderstood phases of the twin flame journey, the void. This is not simply an empty space or a meaningless pause. It is the womb of transformation, the in-between place where the old dissolves, but the new has not yet fully formed. For the divine feminine, the void can feel like a vast silence, a stripping away of everything familiar, and an unsettling emptiness where old dreams, illusions, and fantasies no longer carry meaning. In this space, she often feels as though her identity has been dismantled, her usual roles have fallen away, and she is left bare, surrendered entirely to God, spirit, or the higher intelligence of her soul. The void is often misunderstood as punishment, rejection, or a cruel delay, yet in truth it is none of these things. The void is a gestation period, a sacred incubation. Just as the seed must rest in the dark soil before it breaks open and sprouts, the feminine must rest in this unseen place before her next level of becoming emerges. When she surrenders to this process rather than resisting it, she begins to understand that the void is not an absence of life, but the quiet ground where sovereignty begins to take root. Sovereignty, in this context, is not about control or separation. It is about standing in one's truth without fear of abandonment, about embodying the deep knowing that love cannot be lost because love is the essence of the soul itself. In sovereignty, the divine feminine learns to hold her boundaries without guilt or apology. She no longer collapses at the fear of disapproval or bends herself into shapes to please another. Instead, she stands tall in her worth, recognizing that her value is not dependent on another's recognition, but flows directly from her divine essence. This sovereignty also carries profound implications for the way she relates to love. Instead of seeking constant reassurance, she learns to feel worthy of love even in silence. Instead of demanding visible signs, she trusts the unseen threads that connect her to her divine masculine. Instead of fearing that distance or pause means loss, she learns to rest in the truth that real love is indestructible. It may go through seasons of silence, testing, and refinement, but it cannot die. Perhaps one of the most powerful aspects of this process is that it does not only affect the individual feminine. Each woman who rises in sovereignty clears and rewrites energetic code for the entire collective. When she chooses not to chase, not to abandon herself, and not to compromise her truth, she becomes a lighthouse for others walking the same path. Her healing reverberates beyond her personal story, rippling into the collective field of the divine feminine. In this way, collapse and void are not merely personal crises but planetary initiations, moments where the vibration of humanity itself is raised through individual transformation. So, while the void may feel like a season of loss, isolation, or even death of the old self, it is in reality the soil of sovereignty. It is the threshold where illusions dissolve and authentic power is born. The feminine who emerges from this place does not return weaker or broken. She rises rooted, radiant, and untouchably whole, anchored in the knowing that her worth was never up for debate and her love was never truly at risk. The void is not the end. It is the holy pause where sovereignty blossoms, both for her and for the awakening of the collective. Number 6. Stabilized union. Union after collapse is not about repairing or patching together the old dynamic that once defined the connection. What emerges is something entirely new, reborn from the ashes of collapse, anchored not in fantasy or imbalance, but in truth, resonance, and sovereignty. Stabilized union is a higher octave of love, one that replaces chaos with coherence, dependency with balance, and silence with honest, heart-centered communication. It is not just two individuals coming back together, it is the awakening of a shared field, a third energy that transcends the sum of its parts and becomes a guiding force for mission, service, and spiritual evolution. In this sacred space, love is no longer driven by fear of loss or the urge to control. Instead, it breathes freely as a stabilizing force that carries both the divine masculine and feminine into deeper authenticity. Stabilized union does not waver in the face of challenges because it is not built on illusions. It is structured on the unshakable foundation of sovereignty, each individual standing in their own wholeness while choosing, again and again, to meet in truth. The relationship itself becomes less about clinging to a person and more about serving a shared frequency that uplifts both souls and ripples out into the collective. For the divine masculine, stabilized union means a profound shift from avoidance to presence, no longer hiding behind distractions, defense mechanisms, or karmic entanglements. He learns to stand in his heart with clarity and consistency. His love is no longer expressed in fleeting gestures or temporary intensity, but through reliability, integrity, and steady devotion. He begins to understand that his presence simply showing up fully is the greatest gift he can give, both to himself and to his counterpart. For the divine feminine, stabilized union calls forth a new embodiment of softness without self-abandonment. Her strength no longer lies in over-functioning, chasing, or carrying the connection alone, but in her capacity to radiate compassion while maintaining her sacred boundaries. She lives mission first rather than relationship first, recognizing that her path of service, truth, and authenticity fuels the union more than any attempt to control its outcome. By standing in her sovereignty, she creates the space for the masculine to meet her as an equal, rather than as someone to be rescued, fixed, or completed. Together, the masculine and feminine anchor a union that is not only personal but planetary. Their connection generates a resonance that extends far beyond their individual lives, touching families, communities, and even the collective consciousness. Stabilized union is not simply about the bliss of two souls reunited. It is about the activation of a love field powerful enough to transform the world around them. This shared energy becomes a lighthouse in dark times, a reminder that divine love is not fragile, not conditional, but enduring, resilient, and creative. Stabilized union is therefore not the end of the twin flame journey, but its true beginning. From this foundation of coherence, respect, and aligned mission, the divine masculine and feminine walk hand in hand, not to escape the world, but to serve it. Their love becomes a living testament to what is possible when two sovereign souls surrender to a higher truth and allow that truth to guide every step of their path together. Beloved souls, remember this: collapse is not the end of your journey, it is the holy beginning. What crumbles was never meant to carry the weight of eternity. What dissolves is only the scaffolding of illusion. And what remains, truth, sovereignty, love, is the very essence of your soul's design. As you walk through collapse, know that you are stepping into the most sacred initiation of all. You are being rewired, reborn, and prepared for a love that does not waver. And as you rise, you lift not only yourself but also the divine masculine and the collective heartbeat of feminines across the earth. Every act of truth you embody becomes part of the architecture of union that cannot be shaken. Let this truth resound in your spirit. Collapse is not my breaking, it is my becoming. I invite you to write this in the comments, but go further, share what this teaching has stirred in your own journey. Speak from your heart. Your words may be the very medicine another soul needs to read today. If this message touched you, I encourage you to like this video, share it with someone you love, and continue this journey with the next teaching waiting below the screen. Every time you engage, you strengthen the field we are building together, an eternal field of truth, freedom, and divine love. Until we meet again, walk gently, rise bravely, and know this: you are not alone.